Hi everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name's Amber and today's video is going to be a wrap up of all the books that I've read so far this year. So this is the first reading wrap up of 2025. The reason I didn't do one in January is because I didn't feel like I'd read enough books, and at the end of February I changed job again, so I just didn't really have the time. So I thought I would do a bit of a quarterly reading wrap up and just talk about all the books that I've read in January, February and March. So I've read 13 books so far this year, and these are the 5 that I've read physically. I've read quite a lot of them on my Kindle as well, so I will have to just put some pictures up. I'm gonna go from my least favourite to my most favourite. So the one that I have least enjoyed so far is The Drift by CJ Tudor. This is a thriller book that has some horror elements in it. It's set in a society where there's been some sort of pandemic, think like zombie apocalypse mixed with COVID type situation, and we're basically following 3 different groups of people in alternate chapters. So one of these groups is a bus full of students and their bus has just crashed in like this snowy area. Another group are on like a ski lift, but not a ski lift. If you live in the UK and you've ever been to Alton Towers, those things that like take you across on like a, what are they called? I can't remember what they're called. I'll put the name on the screen. But basically one of those things that like carries you from place to place. A group of people just wake up on there. They don't really remember why they're there and somebody turns out to be dead. And then the other group are basically living at this place called The Retreat. It really reminded me of like a zombie stronghold type place where they have to go out and do grocery runs and stuff. And you don't know if these things are happening simultaneously or if they are connected in some way. I did quite enjoy the world in this. I do like a zombie post-apocalyptic scenario, but I just didn't really connect with the characters in this especially. I thought there was just too many. We were following these 3 different groups and they all kind of just merged into one. A few guys that I just could not distinguish whatsoever between each other. And then when this kind of reveal happens, I just wasn't interested. I don't know if I'm just less interested in thrillers than I was a few years ago. It did keep me reading, but it didn't make me invested in the story itself. By the end of it, I still wasn't invested in the characters. I didn't understand their motivations, I wasn't rooting for them, and I just kind of wanted it to end. Which is a shame because I did read another book by this author a few years ago. I think it was called The Chalk Man, and I gave it like a 4-star. So yeah, I've given this one like a 2.5. I just feel so meh about it. Next up, we've got all my 3.5 star ratings. So first off, we've got Strange Pictures by Yuketsu. It's kind of a collection of shorter stories focusing on these like creepy pictures, and they all kind of come together to form one big mystery. I did enjoy this. I found it a lot of fun. It gave me that fun feeling that a mixed media book does, where we've got little pictures to look at and it's kind of got this creepy atmosphere where you're trying to find hidden things in the pictures and stuff. However, I did think that this book was very like oversimplified. It very much over-explained some of the mysteries. I felt like I was always one step ahead of the characters in here. They were very like slow to catch up, and that was kind of annoying. I did have quite a lot of doubt about how much I was going to enjoy this because it almost felt like YA kid level, but it did kind of get better as the book went on. And I did really like how the mystery all came together in the end. I thought it was a lot of fun. I would definitely read more from this author if they were to bring out like similar stuff, but I can see how it might be a little bit frustrating for some people just because it's quite simple. The dialogue especially was kind of unrealistic, I guess. I really hate it in books when certain characters will like say something out loud when they probably would have just said it in their head in real life, but for the sake of like the book they have to have said it. But then again they don't, because you could easily just say that they thought this thing. They don't have to like murmur it out loud to themselves all the time. I don't know, I just always find that a bit unrealistic. Also some of the dialogue between the characters was a little bit like stilted. I don't know if that's just like a Japanese translation thing. Overall, I had a good time with it, and yeah, like I said, I would read more from the author. Next up is Escape and Control by Steve Holliman. So this was, I think, maybe a 5-star prediction for me. It was definitely on my 25 books to read in 2025 list anyway. This is a really interesting book. We're basically following a guy called Steve Holliman within the book who's written a manuscript, and his manuscript goes missing one day. This professor then reaches out to him and says, "Oh, I've found your manuscript. Do you want me to send it back to you?" So Steve then starts reading back over this old manuscript and finds that somebody has written like alternate chapters that he's never seen before, he's never written. It's kind of odd because they mention details about his life that it has to be somebody that knows him who's written this. Steve and the professor, they agree to analyse it together and they come up with footnotes and things. So we're reading not only the original manuscript, we're reading the chapters written by this mysterious figure, and we're also reading the footnotes and the conversations between Steve and this professor. So there's a lot going on. It was very interesting. It's very like meta. There's a lot of mention of meta stuff. I don't want to like go way into it because a lot of it went over my head, I won't lie. There's some of it that's quite academic, especially from the professor. He will mention like academic texts and references, and some of that I was like, it's literally not comprehending in my brain. I'd be rereading it like multiple times. I'm like, I'm not sure what's happening. But then I later learned that Steve Hollyman, the author, like the actual author, I think used this book as part of his own kind of academic career. I think he maybe did like a PhD or something, and like this was part of it. So that kind of makes sense as to why it's in there. He also created a couple of Facebook pages that relate to this book. So some of the characters mention Facebook, and you can actually find the Facebook pages and see the posts that he's referencing. I don't know if that quite worked for me because one, it felt a little bit outdated, and that's no fault of the author. Obviously, I'm reading this, first edition 2022. Well, that's kind of interesting actually. I'm surprised that he went down the Facebook route because a lot of the Facebook pages look really old. But I also didn't really want to check the Facebook pages because I didn't want to be spoiled. So again, I don't know if it really worked for me. I think this is quite an ambitious book and it definitely has a lot of cool ideas and it becomes a whole lot bigger towards the end. I did get a really good feeling about this book when I started it, but I think it just lost me a little bit and I just didn't really get it. And that might be a me thing. I feel like I've probably not really explained this book very well, but I think if you enjoy meta, mysterious, like social commentary type stuff, then you might enjoy this. It was interesting, it just didn't like fully work. So I've given it a 3.5, I think. It's somewhere between a 3 and a 3.5. Next, I've got two novellas that I read in very quick succession. I was really just in the mood for some snappy books and it would give me that feeling that I've read a book in a day, even though it's kind of like a third of a normal book size. So the first one is Mr. Cables by Ronald Malfi. This is about an author who is at like a book signing one day and somebody brings a book to him and says, this is like your worst book you've ever written, it's terrifying. And he's looking at this book and it is not one that he recognises at all. He does not think he's written it, but like his name's on the front, his author picture's in the back. So he's quite confused. He takes it home with him, starts reading it, and it's just like a normal book. He just thinks it's like super boring, but he's never written it. But everyone else in his life who does read it thinks that it is like the scariest thing ever. And that premise just creeped me out a little bit. So I don't want to say much more than that. That is like the gist of the plot. It's only maybe like 90 pages or something. I enjoyed this one. It was a quick read. I read it all in one go. The writing was really easy to get through. I was interested in the mystery. I liked where it went. And I also liked the ending. I liked how it kind of tied into what we'd already read. But it's not one that I've like thought about since I read it. It was just a fun time when I did read it. So I've given it 3.5 because I don't really have anything bad to say about it. And then the next novella that I read, which I did prefer slightly more, is called My Death by Lisa Tuttle. I think I read this directly after reading Mr. Cables and I instantly felt that this book was way more like well written from a literary perspective. The writing was just really like easy to lose yourself in. We're following this woman who's a widow. She's a writer, but she's not really written anything in a while because she's still grieving her husband. One day she has a chat with her editor and she basically all of a sudden decides that she's going to write a biography about this woman who she was previously very inspired by when she was a teenager. So I can't remember her name, but she is a writer. Oh, she's called Helen. So Helen, is she called Helen? I'm going to call her Helen. So she was a writer. She got into a relationship with her much older teacher. He basically had like tons of fame and Helen was just known as his young lover, and that was kind of it. So she decides she's going to write a biography about her being like a forgotten woman in history. And she ends up meeting this woman and it's kind of about them just like having a dialogue with each other and realising that they've got more in common than they thought they did. And like I said, the writing was just very easy. I didn't really want to put it down ever. It's not the kind of book that I would instantly be interested in, but I was just really interested in where it was going to go. It does have a very twisty ending actually. I wasn't expecting it. I didn't get it at first. I feel like I'm coming off quite dumb in this video. There's just books that I read and I'm like, you're not going in properly. And this ending was one of them. I was like, what just happened? So I reread it again. I got it. And I really liked it actually. I think I would give this, if I'm being very technical, like a 3.75. We have another 3.75 actually, and that is Things We Do Not Tell the People We Love by Huma Qureshi. This is a short story collection and it's very just like literary fiction, contemporary fiction, I guess. I think all of the stories were following women and their relationships with their mothers, their children, their partners. I think this was like the first book that I read this year, so forgive me if I'm not entirely remembering everything about it. Oh, let me look in my reading journal actually. I've just opened up my notes that I wrote about this because this is the first book that I read this year and quite a lot of it has kind of disappeared, to be honest. The author is a British woman born to Pakistani parents, so there's quite a lot of talking here about religion and cultural expectations and how that can put a strain on families. That was so interesting to read about. And a lot of these stories do kind of have that as a key theme. You know what, now I'm reading my notes, I'm going to bump this up to a 4 because reading back I really enjoyed some of these. There's one called Superstitions which talks about some of the elements of religion that can still be helpful in times of need, because a lot of the stories are not critical of religion but emphasize a lot of the strains and tensions that come with that. So it was nice to see a little bit of a flipped perspective on it as well. But my two favourites, one of them was called Firecracker and it was about this friend who was just like a really whirlwind, chaotic kind of person, and it talks about the disillusion of their friendship, and I just loved that one. I thought it was just really beautiful, really sad. And then the other one was Too Much, which I had a lump in my throat, tears in my eyes by the end. It was about a mum who'd basically been cut out of her daughter's life because she's kind of overbearing. It's about her like trying to reunite with her daughter, but the more that she does that, the more that she's pushing her daughter away, and it was so sad. I was probably as close as I could get to full-on crying, and just the whole book was really beautifully written. There was some gorgeous imagery and descriptions in there. I would definitely like to read more from this author. Another 4-star short story collection isn't actually published yet, I don't think. It's called It's No Fun Anymore by Brittany Mika Foos. I got this one on NetGalley because it just sounded really interesting and I really loved it. It's basically a short story collection about various women. I obviously like collections just about women. It was very similar to the last book in the sense that it focuses on relationships, friendships, motherhood, but it also had that weird girl fiction tone to it. The author's voice I just loved. It was really strong. A lot of it was quite dark, especially the first story. There was a very surprising, disturbing scene that came out of nowhere, but I really enjoyed the whole book. My favourites were the first one, so that one's called The Experiment. That one is about a woman who basically decides that she wants to revert to the traditional woman role. I think that is in the aftermath of some little girl going missing. I can't exactly remember the connection here of why she decides to do that, but she does. And it all gets a little bit too far, and I really would have liked like a full novel about this. Another favourite was The New Jenny. It's about a woman who's newly single. Her husband was cheating on her with the personal trainer or something. So she buys a gun because she wants to feel like a new woman, and it quickly goes very, very crazy. And I loved that one. And then my last favourite was Border Crossings. So that was the last story. That one was about a woman who is part of an MLM. She sells, I want to say like hair care. It had some slight dystopian political leaning to it, which I thought was really interesting. I would love to read more from this author. I thought she just had a great voice where I just really wanted to keep reading. It was very unique. Very interesting ideas. It had a great like mix of darkness, weirdness, but also like very female energy. I very much enjoyed it. Next up is The Heart by David Sodergren. So this one I also gave 4-star. I really loved it. It was about this woman called Muriel, I think. She's an old woman. She lives in this really remote Scottish village, and basically some rich billionaire from America wants to flatten the whole village, turn it into a golf course, and he's paying people like an extortionate amount of money to sell up, give him their land. And Muriel is stubborn and she does not want to do this. One day she's walking near the sea and she comes across this, like, I want to say, this is how I pictured it, like a gelatinous splodge from the sea apparently. It becomes a creature. It's a very gory book. It's very fun to read. It was pretty horrific and disturbing, but also incredibly satisfying because a lot of the death scenes in this book were just exactly what I wanted, and I was rooting for Muriel the whole time. I've given it a 4-star because I didn't love it quite as much as Dead Girl Blues, but it definitely had the same feel. It had that humour in there mixed with the dark disturbingness, and it has just solidified that I really enjoyed David Sodergren's horror, and I will definitely be reading more. Next we have a non-fiction book. So I have kind of rated this. I'm going with a 4 because that's just my level of enjoyment for this book. It's Nuclear War by Annie Jacobsen. I think I did myself in because I read this on my Kindle. Little did I know that I think 50% of this book is purely like sources, bibliography. So I was reading this book and I was just like, how is this so dragged on along? When is this going to end? And then I got to like the 50% mark and that was when it ended, and the rest of it was like all the sources and stuff. So I think that dragged down my enjoyment a little bit because I felt like I was just like ploughing through it and it was taking forever. Whereas if I'd have had the physical copy, then I would have known that. Maybe I wouldn't have felt so like bogged down. But basically this is, as the title says, it's a scenario of a nuclear war. What would happen if it basically kicked off today? It's very focused in America. So in this specific scenario, we're looking at what would happen if North Korea started an unprovoked nuclear war against the USA by shooting a projectile nuclear war missile at Washington. And we're following like second by second. So it's so detailed, it's so well researched. She's clearly like spoken to so many people and looked at everything in depth. She explains all the science behind it, the like political and social side of it. She goes into so much detail and it's absolutely fascinating, but absolutely terrifying. It talks about deterrence being like the main reason why we don't go to nuclear war, especially like the USA. They have this policy of we are firing back, and we are gonna throw everything at you. It would just be absolute carnage and it would really just be the end of the earth, basically. It did put me in a little bit of a crisis. It made me feel like such a small, puny human that has really no impact on the world. So it's kind of depressing, but it was absolutely fascinating. I've given it like a 4 just because of what I mentioned earlier with I felt like I was ploughing through it and I wasn't getting anywhere, and then all of a sudden it just ended and I was like, oh, okay. Also the fact that it was very American. It took me a little bit longer to get my head around things, just learning all the different abbreviations and the government structure. But yeah, it was so interesting. I would highly recommend it. Next we've got a 4.25-star book, and this one is Good Material by Dolly Alderton. I really enjoyed this. It was so good. This is about a guy called, what's he called? Andy, who's just been dumped by his girlfriend Jen. He doesn't really understand why. He didn't see it coming at all. Andy doesn't take it very well. He's very mopey, he's very miserable. He just can't get over her. He is really struggling. His career as a comedian is flopping. And we're just following Andy through this process of him like moving on from Jen, getting his life back together. But then we also do get an alternative perspective towards the end, which really just like completes the book, I think, to get that other side of it. I have seen quite a lot of like negative reviews for this book, just saying that they hate Andy as a character. I think that's the point. Like, I didn't hate him at all. I actually found him quite like lovable. I'm not sure what that says about me, but I thought he was a nice guy. He was a nice guy who was just down in the dumps, and I would be too if I was in his situation. But when you kind of get that alternate side, you can see the appeal and the charm and like what they had as a couple and how they're not meant to be together and how they're going to move on and have better lives and stuff. It was really well written. It's my first book that I've read from Dolly Alderton. I think she did a really good job of writing about a male protagonist. It really did feel genuinely real. It did also help that I listened to this almost entirely on audio, and it was narrated by Rory from Doctor Who. So I was kind of picturing his character as Andy, which made me hate Andy less than the average person does. We're now getting on to the really good books. This is my first 4.5 star, and it's A Court of Mist and Fury by Sarah J Maas. You might know that last year I did start ACOTAR kind of unwillingly, and I was pleasantly surprised by the first book. I read it during a bit of a reading slump and it really just helped me get out of it. I have been completely like against romantasy for a while, and yeah, I really enjoyed it, and this one was so good. As everyone says, this one is better than the first one, and I thought, right, it's really clever what she's done here. This is the second book, and it takes a real like 360. It massively changes like everything that's going on. It really expands the world. The character dynamics are completely different, but in a way that I'm like, how were you planning this the whole time? I mean, she must have been. To say that I really enjoyed the first book, I enjoyed the romance in the first book, but now I love the romance in this book. The slow burn, oh my god, the slow burn. I was obsessed. I was yearning, pining away for this romance to get going, and it gave me everything I wanted. I'm invested. I'm going to read the rest of the series. It wasn't a full 5-star read because I do still find some of the book kind of silly. Like some of the plot, I guess, towards the end, I thought, wow, that's hella convenient. But yeah, the hatred that I have for certain characters that I was completely fine with in the first book, yeah, crazy. So I really enjoyed it. And if you also have a bit of a prejudice towards romantasy, then give it a go, because I have been humbled with this series. Next is something a little bit more typical for me, and it's We Used to Live Here by Marcus Cleaver, maybe how you'd say his name. I knew this one would be good. Everyone loves this book. We're following a couple who have bought this creepy old house, and one day this family turn up at the door. They claim that they used to live in this house and we're just in the area. Can we come and like look inside for old time's sake? And because our main character is a people pleaser, she's like, okay, I guess so. And I found that very relatable because I wouldn't know what to do either. So she lets this family in, not really seeming to leave. They're kind of overstaying their welcome. It was driving me insane. There's a part where a kid goes in the basement and just won't come out, and they're just like, oh, you know, we just gotta wait. We can't really go in and get her because she'll just stay there even longer. And I was like, oh my god, I would drag that child out by her hair. Not literally, but I'm not letting some kid roam around my basement, like my creepy basement that I don't like. It's dangerous. And her family were just like, you know what, it's easier just to let her stay there for a bit. No. That like drove me mad. It had the perfect level of creepiness. I was genuinely scared reading this book. Like, this book kept me awake at night. I'm not normally a fan of like a haunted house vibe, but this got me. It was really scary. It was action-packed. It was never boring. It was really well written. It had some like mixed media elements to it that I didn't really feel were necessary, but I guess it added another layer to the story. It featured one of my scariest horror tropes ever. The moment that I realised what was going on, the fear inside me. But it was perfect. It was so good. I loved the end. I loved everything. I'm not sure why I gave it a 4.5. Let me check my notes. I feel like it just didn't give me the 5-star feeling. That was it. I feel like I'm just tight with my 5 stars sometimes, but I would recommend it as if I had given it 5 stars, if that makes sense. And the last book is actually a non-fiction. I have given this 5 stars after some reflection. It's Into Thin Air by Jon Krakauer, I think. This book gives the author's account of the 1996 Mount Everest disaster. Multiple people from 3 different touring groups unfortunately died on Mount Everest. Jon Krakauer was a journalist at the time, and he was invited to join one of these groups to go up Mount Everest, and he was going to be writing an article about it. So he is like right in the thick of it. And we're basically following his account about what happened, his experiences. He also does talk about some of the reasons why he thinks maybe the disaster happened, which has proved a little bit controversial, but at the end of the day, this is his account and this is his experience of what happened. This was an absolute horror tragedy. From what I could tell, what he points out as some of the reasons why it might have happened were valid. He mentions a lot about the commercialization of Mount Everest. People with a lot of money can pay companies to help them get to the top of Mount Everest. They might not have had the training that they need, the proper equipment. They're allowed to by these companies who want the money, and it's an issue. So I feel like what he was saying is valid, and there's also that pressure on companies to make sure that people reach the summit. That's kind of what you're paying for, isn't it? So if it's a case of, are we letting people continue up to the summit and get what they've paid for, or are we going to start turning people away, which obviously they should? I can completely see why that hasn't happened and why people were allowed to continue to the summit much later than they initially planned to. Before I read this book, I didn't really have a clue about Mount Everest, mountaineering, any of it. I don't even have a particular interest in it. but I was fascinated. It was so interesting reading his experience as somebody who is a mountaineer. He has quite a lot of experience, but he'd never gone up Mount Everest. He always had this desire to, even though it is so dangerous. And he does talk a lot about that as well, like how there's a kind of selfishness to it where you've got this like overwhelming desire to be able to conquer something, but you are putting yourself at such a massive risk, and the burden that that puts on your family, on your children. People die up there all the time. And then obviously it talks about like the disaster itself, and oh my god, I sobbed. I absolutely sobbed. By the time that he was talking about like that day when they get to the summit, I was really invested in these people. It's so horrifically sad. So yeah, I was crying my eyes out multiple times. He does also talk about the survivor's guilt that he's felt, the uncomfortableness of him publishing this book kind of soon after it happened, and the response that he's had from some of the people's families that he's talking about. He also acknowledges that he gave an account of what he thought had happened, which wasn't actually the case. It was a genuine mistake, but what he thought had happened had a huge knock-on for the people involved's families. It really just felt like such an honest, personal account of what happened, and I do struggle to see why it is so controversial, to be fair. I don't know anything else about the author, but from what I could tell, he seemed very honest and genuine, and also apologetic about the things that he'd got wrong. So the version that I read, I think, was a revised edition where he kind of acknowledges some of the things that he said and some of the errors that he'd made. Yeah, I loved it. I absolutely loved it. It was fascinating, so interesting, a topic that I never thought that I would really enjoy. And I was like telling Mac everything that I'd read, and he was like so sick of me by the end of it, because I was just telling him facts about Everest that he's probably like, okay, cool. I was like, listen to how fascinating this is. This is happening in real life every day. People go up there. Why are they going up there? I was looking at the Mount Everest Wikipedia page, looking at all the different other tragedies that have gone on, but the whole topic of it being commercialized was so interesting. I didn't know that there were like local people, native people that live on Mount Everest, the Sherpas who are regularly hired to take rich white people up the mountain. So much like commentary going on in that book. I could talk about it for hours. So I absolutely loved it. And if you're into non-fiction, if you're into memoir, personal accounts, definitely read this. It was incredible. I think about it quite a lot. And that's it, everybody. So thank you if you've made it this far. That is every book that I've read so far this year. Let me know if you've read any of these books before, or if you now are going to read them. And let me know what you've been reading. What's the best thing you've read so far this year? Because I would love to know. Please give this video a like if you enjoyed it. Leave me a comment or subscribe if you want to. And I'll hopefully see you in my next video. Bye!